And I would outline 4 qualities. Not this, 4 qualities. First of all, St. Thomas More was rock sure. He was adamant. But he was not without sympathy for those who did not share his conviction. I think that's very important for us to understand what we mean by Christian martyrdom and the kind of conscience we need to bring to our work. Second, but a little different quality, is that St. Thomas More was discreet. There was no self-promotion in the certitude which he brought to his judgment of conscience. He said the truth, he witnessed to the truth, but he did not exploit himself and puff himself up as the center of attention. Third, St. Thomas More famously was loyal to the regime that was judging him unjustly. Thomas More never infringed on the virtue of patriotism while he was standing up for the truth. Fourth, Thomas More exercised the heroic charity of the meek in the midst of his witness to the truth. He famously forgave those who set themselves up as his adversaries. I think in these dimensions of his courage, of the way he went about following his conscience, there are very important lessons for all of us. To be at once bold and courageous, and yet being discreet, loving, and meek. And as I move then to conclude, I'd like to make just some remarks about realism as we go forward and do whatever we can to live out the Manhattan Declaration. It's my own judgment that the current social milieu can justifiably leave us with a weakened optimism about our acts of Christian conscience being able to shape the civil order. It might work, it might not. I think there are a lot of grounds for believing that we will succeed, but there is no guarantee. We heard just the last presentation, Doctor talked about how we're not permitted to despair, and we have supernatural hope. But while the outcome of the war is a foregone conclusion, the outcome of the battle in the 21st century is not a foregone conclusion. We need to be realistic about that. And yet, acts of Christian conscience are always valuable in the public square. We owe this to our nation, whether or not, regardless of any calculation about how successful we will be, what the outcome will be in shaping the laws and shaping the civil order. We have to do this. This is our duty. We owe it to the next generation, we owe it to our families, we owe it to one another, and we owe it to the United States. And we go forward with a conviction about the attractive force of our witness when it is given with charity. This is profoundly moving to hearts that are open and of goodwill. There is something beautiful about standing up for the truth when that standing up is done with meekness and charity. Some of us who have in the past participated in the West Coast Walk for Life, I think that's a wonderful instance of the difference between the brutal ugliness of a kind of hate-inspiring ideology and what happens with a loving, meek witness to the truth. And we have to take heart, I take heart, from the attractiveness of the goods to which we do witness. These are beautiful things. We ought not to lose sight of the power of the beauty of the good to which we are witnessing in the Manhattan Declaration. The beauty of a child and a mother's love, a father's love for the child, born or unborn. The beauty of traditional marriage, a father and mother and children living together. And finally, to conclude, I can think of nothing better than an exhortation from St. Paul, the 2nd verse of the 12th chapter of the letter to the Romans. Do not fashion yourselves according to the pattern of this age, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, so that you may judge what is God's will, what is good, pleasing, and perfect. 5 points about that text. Paul makes a distinction between being fashioned according to a pattern, schematized is his Greek way of saying it, versus being transformed, undergoing a metamorphosis. To be fashioned according to the pattern of this world is to simply go along with the opinion of the age. To be transformed is to have our conscience shaped by the truth. Our mind is, as then Paul says, changed, renewed. We think right when we are transformed. We judge so that you may judge about God's will. We see how it works. And what is it that we judge? God's will, what God wants. And Paul says, what is it God wants? God wants the good. Agathon. God wants the acceptable. And God wants what's perfect. God wants what hits the mark, what leads us to achieve the perfection He had in mind when He created us. This is what we are about. First of all, ourselves being transformed, so that then we can be agents of truth, agents of transformation in our culture, in our society, in our own native land, the United States. Praise be Jesus Christ.
Amen.